So without further ado, we'll be delving into our first speaker, which is Emma Gage, and they are the Wellbeing Campaign Manager from BITC. I'm really excited to be hearing a perspective from a membership organization who's done so much amazing work in the area of mental health and well-being. And on a side note, I definitely encourage you to check out their website. They have amazing toolkits, amazing reports. So again, in some time off or later this week, I encourage you to have a look on their website. So I see Emma's here. Hi, Emma. Thank you for joining. So Emma's speech, hi. Emma's speech today will be about putting your people first, a people-centered strategy for business success. So I will let you take it away, Emma.
Okay. So it's such a pleasure to be with you all, and just to echo Jen, there isn't a more important time for us all to be here and talking about this. And I really like the title that Dods Group have put on this, putting your people first. And what we've seen at BITC is the people agenda and wellbeing shoot up the boardroom priorities, which is exactly where we need it to be. So through my presentation, I'm going to share with you some of the insights that we have from leading businesses across the UK, what's working now because things are changing quickly, and what our research is telling us, because we've just finished some research on mental health and wellbeing during the pandemic. So I will start by setting the scene. We'll then use our BITC Work Well model, which, as Jen said, is freely available on our website. So I encourage you to take a look at that after the session. And then we'll talk about how we bring that alive through employee voice, through wellbeing surveys, and what's working, how frequently, and what our members are telling us they are doing right now. And finally, and I wanted to get onto this finally because we'll look at how wellbeing, engagement and productivity interconnect. And the majority of this presentation will be spent on wellbeing, because essentially wellbeing is the driver for engagement and productivity. So we'll come on to that interesting relationship right at the end. But what I want us to do is to look at what's going on, what the evidence is telling us, what's working on wellbeing, because that's what will promote engagement and productivity. And then we'll end with some calls to actions from our campaign that we've just launched on building back responsibly. So as I said, I'm from Business in the Community, and we work across the whole spectrum of responsible business. So we look at the planet, we look at people, and we look at what it means for communities and how business can drive positive outcomes for all of society. So essentially you can see our map there, which I won't go into detail in, but it just shows you all of the elements that we look at BITC, moving towards the Sustainable Development Goals. So as I said, we work closely with our members, and we have some of the most incredible members in business, and they give us best practice, and they help shape our way forward. So everything that we're saying is based on business. So our mission together, our vision is that all organizations and people are the best that they can be. So we're creating those environments where everybody can be the best that they can be. Can I just ask before I go forward, Kieran, there's a panel there. Does that mean that everybody can't see the far right-hand side of my screen? Do I need to move it?
It's absolutely fine, Emma. Everyone can see.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so building back responsibly. So you heard from Jen, and you all know from the news that we're going back in to more to harsher measures with the pandemic. But what we can see is that the pace is moving so quickly that what we wanted to do was to gather all of that best practice from businesses that are doing it well, because you saw at the beginning there was businesses that were being held up as villains and those that were being held up as heroes, and what was working well, so that we could bottle it, so that as we move through the next bit of the pandemic we can share that. And I've picked out a quote You can find the report on our website, and there's so much, not just on well-being, but on the environment and on inclusion, because we know that all of those elements also drive well-being. But I think that this is a particularly important quote because it's from an economist, and he's saying that essentially we've always thought that business knows better. Well, it doesn't. It's part of society, and that we're inextricably linked. You know, we all need each other, and that when we don't prioritize people in society, we just prioritize business, that's when we get to many of the problems that we're facing today. So I wanted to share with you a video, and this is where I think Kieran is going to be able to make that happen. Thank you. So that for us is a message that we can build back responsibly together. Oh, I'm just doing my slides. Sorry, I can't do both at the same time. I will lose my train of thought. Okay, so I'm back on this slide. So essentially for us, that's us creating it in the most practical way we can, so that together we can harness that and build back more responsibly. So the next part of my presentation, oh, it's just frozen. I'm just going to stop sharing, sorry everybody, and then reshare. Okay, right. So the next part, I wanted to go into more specifics on wellbeing and mental health. So we've just finished our 5th year of the Mental Health at Work report. For those of you that know it, we publish it on our website. So the biggest focus for us as a campaign, a wellbeing campaign, is to ensure that work doesn't cause poor mental health related symptoms for anybody. And last year it was at 39%, and we've seen a very slight increase this year, and we actually see that as pretty impressive given what's happened this year. We've seen an increase in employees feeling comfortable to speak openly about mental health issues, and that's quite a big increase. So a reduction in stigma, and we think that that's because we're able to connect in a more human way. You know, we're sat in each other's living rooms or wherever you are. You might be in an office or something, or wherever you are. And then we know that employees feel more supported than they did this time last year. So 9% more supported with their mental health problems. So that actually is quite good news considering what's going on. We've still got a long way to go though, because that figure, that 41%, is still far too high. And in terms of the drivers for the poor mental health at work, we know it's pressure. That's the biggest driver of poor mental health at work. And then it goes to workload and long hours. So if you think about presenteeism and you think about productivity, this driving poor mental health because of pressure will have an impact on productivity. But we'll come on to that a bit later. So the BITC Workwell model, this section of the presentation, I'm moving away from context setting and research and moving towards examining well-being from all the different facets. So this is our Workwell model, and it's evidence-based. It's based on what's working with our members. It's based on research, and it's based on some of the most incredible experts in well-being. So it all starts with leadership, which is at the center, and I'm sure you all know that, you will have experienced it yourself. What we see is there's two versions of well-being strategies. You have the low-hanging fruit and doing stuff around the sides, which is great, but we often don't see that creating systemic change. So we still see poor mental health being caused or contributed to by work. So leadership is where it all starts in terms of role modeling, and especially now. So leaders that are being authentic about their experience in COVID, leaders that are role modeling health and wellbeing behaviours, so taking time out of work, making sure they take their lunch break, having healthy habits, really simple, like going for a run maybe at lunchtime. And then leading with empathy, compassion, and inclusion, so that people that those behaviours that we need to feel well and to feel safe in the workplace are being displayed. And then we move to better management, because our research tells us that line managers drive a lot of people's experience at work. So if you think about where the workflow comes from, and we know that pressure and workload are the biggest drivers at the moment, that line managers often have control over that. So we're calling for good training for line managers, but also enabling line managers to prioritise wellbeing. They've got enough space in their day, and that they've got support from the organisation to do that, so that line managers have good line manager support as well, because it's a lot of pressure for them too, and they are humans just like us. So better work, here we look at good work. So we look at making sure that everybody has access to financial, looking at in-work poverty, so that there's no reducing levels of contracts that might be unstable. And I know that that's incredibly difficult at the moment, but that's kind of a priority for wellbeing in terms of feeling safe and secure. Psychologically safe workplaces, so people feel able to speak, able to be honest. And then finally looking at job quality. So how can we enhance those elements that we've seen in COVID? Our members are telling us that flexible working is coming up the agenda because people want to change the way that they're working, and we also know that that really helps people's well-being. Better mental health, that's where we look at all of the facets of mental health, physical health, financial health, and social well-being. And we've talked a lot about mental health, that in terms of social well-being, that's coming up because recent research produced by Mind and by BITC found that that social isolation and loneliness were two of the biggest drivers at the moment for poor mental health caused outside of work. So there's various different facets with that. So looking at what the risks are and what the opportunities are in all of those areas, especially if you think about COVID and the physical health risk, what we can do to protect people. And then better specialist support. This is when we look at tailored approaches for people that are experiencing poor mental health. So things like reasonable adjustments and all of those elements that help people to stay well. Inclusive culture. So if you think about what it feels like to belong, to feel safe, to be able to bring your whole kind of being to work, we ask employers to prioritize inclusive culture. And again, you can find all of those practical tips on how to do that on our website. We're launching an everyday inclusion campaign, which is all about how do you create an inclusive workforce and culture, based on some research with University King's College London. So head over to our website and check that out. And then collaboration with stakeholders. We all know how quickly things are changing at the moment, and we need each other. We need each other to learn and to do this together. You know, it's an incredibly difficult task to do alone. So collaborate with organisations like Dods, like BITC, with charities, etc. So finally, I mean, when I first heard this, I came from a HR background, and I thought I knew wellbeing, and there's so much more to it than I ever realised. What we know is that prevention is better than the cure. So when we come on to the section later on, all about surveys and listening to people, they will be able to tell you what you need to prioritize, and you will learn that through your survey. So although it's absolutely essential in terms of what makes good wellbeing, and what we've learned from our members, what you prioritize and what you look after first, because there's a lot, your people will tell you as part of your surveys. So just very quickly, I'm just going to hover over one or two bits that we're seeing has been a massive positive out of COVID. So we're seeing organisations, big organisations, that have said that they never thought that they'd be able to do flexible working and remote working to scale. So we know that when needed, business can make change, and they can do it incredibly quickly, and decisions have been fast-tracked, and our leadership team have just said that they absolutely don't want to let go of that. We've seen Black Lives Matter come to an absolutely incredibly important tipping point. If you head over to our website and check out the Race at Work Charter of steps of how to look at race in the workplace and make sure that you're providing the support that's needed, and tackle systemic racism, then yeah, please do so. And there's lots of free events as well. Empathy and compassion, again, that's something that I remember listening to Peter Cheese, kind of it was only sort of maybe spring, early summer, and he was saying that they're really seeing a rise in humanity and us being able to have that connection. So again, that's something that we don't want to lose hold of. And we did a survey on one of our webinars, and people were tangibly feeling an increase in empathy and compassion at work, which is brilliant. And just in terms of some of the challenges, and I wanted to highlight these to you, because although it's all about tailoring what your workforce needs, what your individuals need, it's also important to know what the kind of is going on across the UK, because it might be risks that your workforce are experiencing as well, and very likely that they are. So I talked about social isolation and loneliness coming up as a bigger priority, but unfortunately we're seeing increases in domestic abuse, of course, death, bereavement, grief and suicide. And again, we've got toolkits on all of those and how to provide support on our website. So crucial sources of information in promoting wellbeing and productivity. So the members that we're speaking to, because things are moving so quickly for everybody, and in the pandemic, that the best thing at the moment is pulse surveys. So doing them quickly because things are changing so fast. And that, in terms of how often, how frequently you do that, really does depend on the size of your organisation and what your needs are. But we're seeing kind of at least once a month for the larger organisations to understand, to be able to pivot where the wellbeing strategy and where the wellbeing support needs to go. Listening and responding. So whilst we're talking about pulse surveys and quick getting those insights, what's also key is that people are seeing that they've been listened to and that the organisation is responding. Because one of the barriers that our members were telling us was that business employers were experiencing people having survey fatigue. So really simple. You said, we did, the classic, to make sure people know that they've been heard. And then when we look at surveys, a top tip, and this was from Pets at Home, they did a webinar with Mind, or part of the mental health work commitment, is to include free text boxes so that you can get that insights, and that people aren't restrained to what you've kind of asked them to tick box. So finally, I just wanted to leave you with people with the importance of psychological health and safety psychological safety with this, because we can have all of the best methods in the world on surveys and asking people to come to forums to give us feedback, but if people don't feel safe to speak, or that they could be penalised for what they say, or that their voice won't be heard, that they're just a method. So it's so important when we talked earlier about the work well model, leadership, so that tone is set from the top. People know it's a priority, and people know that the organisation really wants to hear what the issues are so that they can solve it. And one of the big high street banks did a event with us, and they are really I really liked this, because they just said that you need to fall in love with the problem first and understand what the issues are that you're trying to solve, so that people need to know that you want to hear what the problems really are. So I'm just looking at the time. I think I'm still good for another 5 minutes. Yeah. So how do wellbeing, engagement, and productivity interconnect? So wellbeing is a driver for engagement and productivity. And before the pandemic, the last face-to-face event I went to was the workplace wellbeing conference in the NEC in Birmingham. I don't know if any of you went. And Dame Carol Black was speaking, and she was talking about how from the research from Britain's Healthiest Workplace, that they've seen an increase, quite a big increase year on year, of presenteeism, and the biggest driver for that was poor mental health. So if you think about what we mean by productivity, being the best that we can be, being our best versions of ourselves, and being able to be in the moment, to be able to be in flow, be able to be productive. All of those things need good mental health and need well-being. So that's why I spent the majority of my presentation on well-being and looking at what those factors are that drive positive mental health and well-being, because that's what will lead us to productivity. And before this session, I was doing a bit of research on engagement, because there's so many different definitions and ways of looking at engagement, in the same ways there are with wellbeing, productivity, and engagement. And I think the CIPD was saying there's something like 60 definitions that are known or recognised. Might have got that figure slightly wrong, but it was high. It was high on engagement. So they were saying that that organisations need to define what they mean by engagement, and they used a definition, the one that they cited. I'm just going to get it because was Utrecht University in the Netherlands, and they talked about engagement being about being absorbed and being resilient. So if you think about what we need to be able to be absorbed, what we need to be able to be present, again, it comes back to mental health and well-being, and what we need to be able to be resilient as well. So that's why I'm saying we need to prioritise well-being to get to engagement and productivity. So a few calls to action before I leave you for questions, and before I stop my presentation and we can engage in some dialogue. These 3 calls to actions are based on we did interviews with some of the biggest thought leaders on wellbeing, and those that are really doing the work in business at the moment on wellbeing. And the 3 things in the report are elevate mental health and safety on a par with physical health and safety, and we've actually seen that in getting much better with the pandemic, which is great news, and doing that through the mental health at work commitment, because for the first time there's a collaboration with Mind, with CIPD, with BITC, and some brilliant charities that are all working in this space to have the same narrative, which I think is incredible, because wellbeing is such a busy and sometimes confusing space, because we're all saying similar things but in a slightly different way. So that's a really good framework setting it out for you. And then redesigning jobs to promote long-term mental health. So essentially here we're saying build on what we've learned with COVID. We've seen an increase in flexibility with remote working, but we've also seen a problem with jobs, with pressure and workload, and we think that that's going to get worse as the pandemic continues. So it's how you look at creating those jobs that enhance well-being, specifically from your workforce. And I can't remember which organisation it was. A business was saying that with tackling these issues, that when asking your people, they will know what the crunch points are with pressure. They will know what the crunch points are with workload, and they will be able to work with you to help solve it together. And then it's don't shy away from challenging issues, because they're becoming more and more prevalent. So domestic abuse, suicide, and bereavement, all toolkits on our website. So this is just to give you the link so that you've got it, because they've just, so not only can you sign up to the commitment with the key actions on mental health, but also those organisations have joined together to create webinars, and I really encourage you to look at them because they are brilliant. So thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure to be with you today, and I'm looking forward to hearing any questions that you have.
Thank you so much, Emma. That was incredibly insightful. And as always, BITC is very much one of the leaders in space. So really exciting to be sharing all the work that you're doing. Kieran, do we have any comments or questions coming in through the Q&A?
Yeah, we have one question. It says, in your opinion, what is the biggest wellbeing challenge that the pandemic has brought about, or is perhaps yet to come?
That's a good question. So for me, it's pressure and workload, because that's what our research is telling us. So if you think about the way that work is changing, and what happens with human beings when we're threatened, because of job security and looking at what's going on with the economy, if we don't act now to create those safe workplaces where people don't have to work harder to try and hold on to their jobs, because of the implication that will have on their lives. For me, it's pressure and workload. So it's how we reduce that. And there was some research that came out from Nuffield Health, but it was before the pandemic, and they talked about what happens when people work from home and what happens when you're a remote worker. And I know that that's only a portion of society, and many people are facing, they're on the front line and facing many risks with COVID. But when we're remote working, there's also risks in terms of trust. So if people don't feel safe and don't feel trusted, and that they need to be present to work harder, even though they're not necessarily producing the outputs, you will see a decrease in mental health, decrease in productivity. So yeah, for me, that's the biggest workplace risk at the moment.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing that, Emma. Do we have anything else popping in, or do I get to pick some of my questions?
Yeah, that's the only one, Jen.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, great. So I'm a big fan of the Mental Health at Work report. So I've read it many times, many different years. I was wondering if you could share with everyone, does the mental health report take identity into account? And is that something you are planning on introducing in the future? So for example, we talked about, or you spoke about how people are feeling more comfortable to speak about their mental health and stigma is decreasing. Is that true for everyone, or is that true just for white people? Is that true just for straight people? Do you kind of have those parameters, or is that something you're looking to create?
That's a really good question. We did last year. So last year we did a really big report, and we looked at all of those factors and what the impact age has on mental health, on gender, on race, on sexual orientation. This year we've launched with the top findings for the workplace, and we're going to do kind of more stuff, and we'll be cascading it later in the year. What we know is, and this, it still needs to be distilled. So what we're seeing is it's worse for women at the moment in terms of mental health and young people. But yeah, more will come out, and it's incredibly important because if you think about taking an individual and tailored approach, we're all different and we all need different things, and different factors will drive our well-being in different ways. So yeah, it's really important question.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point as well. We really do need to focus on the individual, because even in the pandemic, it's the same pandemic, but it's not affecting everyone in the same way. So you can't really take that broad brush approach and generalize it. It really needs to be individual.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
One of the other things I thought was really interesting was you're speaking about how important it is for engagement and drive in the well-being space to be from the top down, and how important it is for senior leaders to open up and share their own experience of mental health. So how do we encourage more of that? Or do you have any best practice tips and tools for how to get senior leaders, or even people within an organization at any level, to feel comfortable enough to speak out and kind of help decrease that stigma?
That's a really good question. So where we see action is when business talks to business as well. So that's why when we do our case studies, and when we share our stories, we try and do it so that organizations can see what others are doing, so that they can feel safe, they can be inspired, but also we see almost a bit of a competitiveness of, especially if they're in similar sectors. So I would say sharing stories and sharing that the role models, and we need to lift them up. So for example, Antonio, CEO of Lloyd's, I'm sure all of you know him as an incredible mental health advocate, but he took He took 6 or 8 weeks out of work, and was honest and open about stress, and that was huge for the banking industry and for business. So it's lifting up those role models, I would say.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Emma. A lot to think about. So I think rather than trying to squeeze in a question in the next 40 seconds, might be a little bit too much of a lightning round. I think I'll just give everyone an extra 30-second break. So if I can get you all to come back promptly at 9:50. And thank you again, Emma, so much. That was really insightful.
Thank you. Thanks so much, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, Emma. Bye.
Bye.